All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, October 16th, and we have reached the end of, or the last week of the month. We've reached week 4, and our focus this week is taking the knowledge that you've gained and the assignments that you've worked on and putting it in a form that you can use beyond this month. So now, by the end of week 3, you have 2 fully working Mac games with your music and sound effects working in them. You used Wise along with your music and sound effects to create the interactive soundtrack in Wise. I got a few messages relating some issues, but overall, it seems that most folks were successful in getting everything up and working. So if you still have any outstanding issues, please contact me. If you've already messaged me, then I have either responded or am troubleshooting the issue. But certainly this week is the week to reach out and let me know of any sort of issues or challenges you're having, either with Wise or with any of the other assignments. And we want to kind of wrap everything up nicely for the end of the month. So here in week 4, you do not have any new game compositions because we don't have a week 5 for peer review and revision and all of those aspects of it. But you will be taking your final composition and your game and creating a game capture from that shows your music and sound effects working and functioning and playing back in the game. So the game application, now you can take the original game application or the one that you have used and has your sounds in it, and you can distribute that. It's yours to show off. You can load it up on Dropbox and send a link around. You can host it on your website, zip it up, and just let everybody check it out. But there are some limitations. The main one is that the individual has to have a working Mac computer to play the game. And also, not a lot of people like to download random applications off of the internet, assuming that they are coming at this new and trying to check out your work. But they may not want to download some random application off of the internet and run it. So one of your assignments this week will be to create a video capture of your music and sound effects working in the game. You'll ultimately host it up on YouTube, and that is a very easy link to share to let people see the work that you've done. They don't have to download it. They don't have to have a certain type of computer or anything. They can just watch the video and check out the work that you've done. So the assignments, the first assignment of the week focuses on that, and then you also have the final project delivery, where you will deliver the video capture along with giving me some screenshots and information on your overall composition. It's kind of like a post-mortem or a summary of the work that you've done. Tell me the good stuff, the bad stuff, everything that worked and didn't work, and things that you could improve on it. But it's a series of 10 questions. 5 questions about 2D platformer, 5 questions about Angry Bots, and providing basically an overview and summary of how the composition worked, along with the final version that you have there. So in the second half of the class today, we'll discuss the new assignments here for week 4. We'll discuss kind of the last round of the class. But before that, we do have a couple of submissions for peer review. From week 3, you had a chiptune composition, and we have a series of submissions for that look like this. There we go. Oops. So, where'd that go? There we go. So we have a couple of 2D platformer submissions to check out. I'll go ahead and load up a screenshot for each one of these, and we'll just listen to the delivered MP3 file. Let me talk about the assignment as a whole first. The focus of this composition was to introduce some of the restrictions and the limitations of earlier game audio. So in week 3, you were using Wise, and your game is built in the Unity game engine, and it represents basically where game audio technology is nowadays, and what is possible, and the tools that are involved with that. But to give you a taste of how far we've come, we have this composition based on the technology and the limitations of the original Nintendo system. So the challenge of this composition is that you are provided with a very limited set of sounds, and you are provided with certain restrictions to make sure your composition fits within all of that. But we also don't have the requirements of it doesn't need to be interactive, it doesn't need to loop, it's just a linear composition made with the sort of sounds and technique of the original Nintendo system. So you were provided with a logic session. That logic session started out with 4 tracks. Those 4 tracks each had an instance of EXS24 on it. That EXS24 sampler had access to a number of different sound banks that you can open and use and check out. So it gave you a hopefully pretty wide variety of sounds. Although, well, for the technology, I find that a lot of students react to this assignment differently. There is one aspect that we have taken away all of the tools and all of the tricks and all of the synths and samplers and libraries and instrumentation that you have probably become accustomed to. One of the best and, I don't know, worst, or one of the best and least good options or positive options of Logic is the fact that you have what feels like almost an infinite amount of choices. So what I find a lot of students doing when they first start out a composition is they'll open up Logic, they'll start with maybe drums or a bass line, or they have a chord progression or a melodic idea, whatever they want. But they start with a certain synth or sampler or sample library, and they'll open up the first preset and hit a key and go boop, and go, nope, that's not the right sound, and go to the next preset and go bah, and nope, that's not the right sound, and we'll sit there for what might be minutes on end, or a certain long period of time trying to find that perfect sound, and they find something that's good or interesting for them, and then they start writing a line for that. Then they go to the next synth and they do that same sort of repetition where you're just going through presets, or maybe you have a good idea of what you're looking for, so you search or you start with a bass preset and you tweak it all out and change it how you want, but you are kind of washed in this sea of ideas and presets and possibilities. So what, either good or bad, this assignment provides you with a kind of a limited sound palette. This is all based off of very simple waveforms. The original Nintendo had 2 square waves or 2 pulse waves, which were the typically melody and counter melody, or maybe some version of harmony. And a triangle wave for the bass line, and a noise channel, a noise oscillator for the actual drums. So very, very limited palette overall. But what that does is takes away the instrumentation aspect and gets right into the composition. So I find that these can often, the one strength of it is that they can create stronger melodies, harmonies, and changes, because you don't have the ability to rely on interesting sounds that morph and change over time with all sorts of new synthesizers and sample libraries. It gets you down to very, very simple waveforms. So some people love it because it gets them right into the composition. Some people hate it because it takes away all their tools and it kind of feels like a limitation. But I often find a lot of people just sort of enjoy working with these types of sounds and this sort of aesthetic overall. So like I said, the actual composition is a linear composition without needing to loop or be interactive in any sort of way. You are limited to 4 simultaneous voices. Those voices are can change at any time. So beyond just 4 tracks, you could have as many tracks as you wanted, just as long as only 4 of them are playing at any one time. So let me go through a couple of these screenshots here and see if we see any. Oh, looks like I have 2 of those. Let's check out the screenshots and see. Looks like these most are 4 channels. Oops. Okay, here, where you could have as many tracks as you want, just as long as at any one point vertically, there's only 4 sounds playing at any one time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So 4, you were limited to 4 voices, but as many tracks as you want, because the computer system, the original Nintendo, could switch back and forth very, very quickly. And you are, you have to have drums in the composition. You have to have a melody. What you do with the other 2 channels is up to you. It could be drums, bass, harmony, melody, drums, bass, melody, counter melody, drums, harmony, harmony, melody, however you wanted to approach it. There are some restrictions that we don't follow. Some of those restrictions are you can use chords, you can use polyphony. The original Nintendo system, everything was monophonic. So some folks choose to kind of stay with that. Other folks tend to use chords. Then I also provided a series of effects processors on each channel that you could engage and use. They were a little bit of an embellishment of what you had originally, but you could kind of fake some of these effects to get that sense. So we don't follow all of the rules entirely, but it still gives us a good palette to work from. Other aspects that work really well for this composition is faster, more staccato phrasing, not sitting on a sound too long. It depends on what it is and how it's being used, but typically the sounds are so basic or simple that sitting on a interval or just kind of holding a chord too long might get a bit boring or even kind of irritating. So typically faster paced phrasing overall, quick runs are using our sweeping arpeggios, or even using an arpeggiator to write different lines where you use an arpeggiator set to 16th notes or 32nd notes or 64 or even 120, just really fast sweeps, and hold notes and chords and write lines from that. It was another technique that was used. Parallel thirds and fifths, just kind of parallel movement works very well. It's kind of just typical of this era. What else can I come up with? That's a lot of it. rest of it, I'm sure, will come up as we go through each one of these tracks. The other thing I like to do is identify what type of game it feels like, sort of what the overall aesthetic is. Oops. Let's do this. Take that out. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay, let's add this to QuickTime. Check the volume here. And we'll see if this works. No, it does not. Hold on. How about this? There we go. Excellent use of an arpeggiator on that melodic line. Gives some great repetition, gives, like I said, great movement and pacing to the piece overall. Also switching between different sort of note values, switching between, I don't know how fast it gets, but let's say 64th and back down to 32nds and 16ths and 8ths and quarter notes, and these are just kind of held half notes or something. So that sort of variation works. And then you also did some very cool kind of very typical game effects like that just went by. Real fast sweeps. Which maybe is this? I'm gonna guess that. So all of that works out very, very well. Even harmony and melody, I'm sorry, harmony and rhythm has some good changes. I really like when it kind of picks up the pace here. Bass kind of driving on that those kind of changes work out very well to kind of describe what's happening in the game. Faster energy, sort of action periods of time. So good changes overall. The only thing I might add in is to change the sound at different times. Especially when you're doing some of these kind of effects, you could be switching between different instruments and then using the arpeggiator, and it gives you different tones. All right, great place to start there. Let's go ahead. See, can I do this? No. Like QuickTime. Screenshot. We'll go. here. All right. I like the kind of groove that's set up overall. I think that it gets a little repetitive here in these first, well, kind of like the second 4 bars here. Comes in here, does create a change, and you have a little bit of a new line in here. I would just kind of, in the melody, you can see even the shape just kind of repeats. So I would create a little bit more variation in the sort of phrasing and the pattern that you have. So the harmony does change here, but the melodic line comes back and actually see, yeah, the melody here is the same, and the melody here and the melody here is the same. So that's the main thing I would work through, is changing up that melodic phrase. Maybe, and you see the drums are the same all the way through. So creating more variation, kind of rise and fall. Another aspect would be kind of telling the story with the music, being able to lead, especially in this form where it's not partnered with a game yet, but being able to musically explain kind of rises and falls, the action and stealth and danger and winning and losing, being able to portray those things through your music with a certain style overall. And also changing a melodic instrument at some point to create more variation throughout. You could see this in like a card game or something like that, a puzzle game. Overall, nothing that's too, like, I'm sitting there thinking for a little while, nothing that's too frantic or trying to push you forward. All right, very good. I'm gonna do this, I think. Make sure I get the right version of that. All right, let's take that away. Alright, so it does build nicely over the course. I would say it is quite repetitive in its phrasing, even as it does change from one to the next. Like we have a kind of an introduction of a new line here. Still kind of repeating that kind of phrase, da da ba da 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 da, and then it adds a double of that. Oh, no, we got a little change to the groove. That kind of phrasing is repeating. Now everything goes up, which this works for intensity. Like time is running out in the game, where everything kind of builds. I would say the drums could probably build up too. Kind of going to a double time phrase at some point to pick up that pace. But then, like, keep the same ideas where you are layering and building and shifting things up an octave, but move away, or, I mean, you don't want to, there's kind of a riff element to it, kind of a groove to it, so you don't want to pull too far away from that, but having those phrases change up a bit more as they develop over time. So definitely some sort of timed aspect where you have to solve a puzzle or disarm something or take care of some sort of timed event. All right. Very good. Let's check out the next one here. Is this repeating in the first half, or is maybe doubled out twice as long? All right, here we go. All right, so let's see. I like the kind of aesthetic built with those sort of wobbly vibrato synths. I was thinking that they do have a slow attack, so some of these phrases feel a little bit too off the main kind of rhythm that's set up by the percussion. These kind of phrases here. And then I didn't really feel like there was much of a strong, well-defined lead. Everything was sort of mushy around here with the delays and the reverbs until this. Once you get into this part with the melody, then it becomes way better defined. And I think it is the octave that it's in, and it's kind of has a stronger attack, sort of more directly lining up with the rhythm. And then everything else with that better definition at the top, then the rest of that sort of mushy harmonic stuff can work very well together. Then it kind of goes back when it drops down the octave, becomes less defined, kind of lose the melody in here. So I'd say focus more on like this section. This sounds like not like a fantasy game, but it's like an emotional period, or like oh no, I've lost my family, or some monster has come and wrecked the town, or I always, when I hear those kind of wobbly vibrato synths, I always think of maybe underground or a castle somewhere. Maybe a fantasy element to it overall. All right, so yeah, I think that kind of moved more towards that better defined melodic area overall. All right, let's do this one. All right, let's try it out. Let's go. All right, so I think maybe using intervals or chords, or more kind of thinking out the harmony overall, or kind of faster phrases, alternating back and forth. I think it's that like the bass line seems very insistent on one single note, but it feels low enough that the pitch isn't that well defined. I would go for more of a kick snare kind of pattern overall. Feels very dominated by that kick drum. The other stuff on top almost feels like bongos. Watch out for the longer held notes. Go more for rhythmic phrases, like da 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 da, like more just kind of staccato eighth note phrases to really help the pacing of it overall. And then alternate those to move things around a bit more quickly, like that sort of insistent bass line. Kind of sticks out, and it feels like there's some rubbing intervals that are kind of clashing back and forth. All right, so I would work more towards the kind of very strong octaves and kind of the chord tones that you're centering around. All right. Let's try this one. And bring that up. All right, so this one should have some changes in the instrumentation. All right, there's a lot of cool stuff happening in there. Actually, discussed there was 2 versions of this, and now I'm interested to see what the differences are. There was a mastered and an unmastered version, because there was, it seems like some stuff in there that yeah, so all that stutter stuff is in there too. Okay, all right. Here. Okay. Lots of cool things happening. Let me see if I can nail those things down. All right. Oops. So, the first thing I think is there is so much good movement in there that I wonder if some of it is taken away with the reverb and the delays, especially when it gets to that faster stutter stuff. So there's the switching between the instruments definitely works very well. All of that fast movement that you have in the instrumentation works very well. I am trying to figure out where that stutter comes from. If it is just super fast programming of the drums, then you're fine, and I can't completely tell. I'm going to guess that it's not some third-party separate stutter plugin, that it is just all really fast triggered MIDI. But man, it like even the effects go away and all that, so it makes me think that the audio is then processed. But anyway, I don't know how those sorts of, if you just triggered the individual, like the drum samples that we had, if you triggered them that fast, maybe that's exactly where that comes from. So that would certainly be left to discussion. But other than that, all the changes, all the real fast arpeggiated stuff, all of that works out very, very well. I would like to hear it come out of the reverb to help with all of those, like all those little fast things kind of get lost in the reverb. Then I like that it goes back to more of a straight ahead melody. And it certainly looks like you're staying on 4 simultaneous voices. So almost sounds like chirping birds. Like it almost feels like a really cool bird level or something. I don't know if that's at all what you're considering, but that's what I hear with all those little quick changes and being at a really high register overall. So great stuff. Sounds like some really cool programming, and I hope you did a lot of that with an arpeggiator and not having to actually place all of those individually. So yeah, those would be the only considerations that I would have, would be the technique that it was used to reach those things, and then pulling some of it out of the reverbs to kind of focus on the, not get all the intricacies sort of lost in the reverb. All right, very fun. And we will check out the last one here. just right at the very end, you have a lot of reverb on here. We'll let that reverb tail out so it doesn't just get cut off right here. All right, so whoops, going back to the top here, I would say kind of the similar previously, maybe a little too much reverb, mainly on the drums, but it would be really cool to keep one of those snare hits with a whole bunch of reverb. So most of the time it's pretty straightforward drums, and then the last little pattern here, where kick, snare, and then there's a little fill, and the last one would hit off to a really big reverb. So only on like the fourth snare would maybe you have like one big hit that had reverb on it. The next thing is I kept wanting it to take off to this kind of double time feel, where, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, bam, boom, boom, bam, boom, bam, boom, boom, bam, boom, bam, boom, boom, bam. Just kind of a faster pace, and I kept thinking you were going to do it because you do these little fills. So kick, snare, that, boom, bap. And I thought you were going to take off right there, and you do that a couple of times. Boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, bap. Which would help bring up the overall pacing of this. So again, kind of working between double time and half time, and shifting between those rhythms can help the pacing of the piece and kind of tell more of the story. The other thing I noticed was I hear the drums well, I hear that lead line just fine. There's some other harmonic stuff that feels very far back that could work against what is going on in the melody. It's like it's bouncing up and down, and it's doing some interesting stuff. It's just pretty far off, so that could help the melody and create more harmonic interest, and just kind of keep it all moving forward. So bring a lot of the mix. Well, I think you could probably leave a lot of that reverb on the synths, but the drums could come out a little bit. Go to a double time feel to bring up the pace, and yeah, just watch the little tail there at the end. All right. Very good. So we saw a wide variety, and you see how even with the same palette of instruments, you can have a wide variety of compositions and sort of music that appropriate for different types of games. But a lot of it can also be about technique, not just the notes, but how you use those notes, the arpeggiation, the kind of the fast sweeps, and the pacing of the music, and these sort of like the movement and parallel movement of thirds and fifths, and all of that stuff works to. Oh, another one would be using. Often it's the kind of the fast arpeggio sweeps to create more typical effects, sound effects of those times, and putting those little bits of ear candy in there. Makes it work, tells the story very well. Also, think about the same piece of music, or think about your music as a theme for a level or a character, but then state what that piece of music means as like regular exploration and stealth and danger and winning and losing, and just kind of the different emotional roller coaster that goes on in a particular game. Another way to develop this further as a portfolio piece is to split up the composition into restrictions and no restrictions. So keep the same overall idea, same melodic idea, sort of rhythm and development of the music. Start out with the limitations of the original Nintendo, basically what you have here. But at some point in the composition, it switches and blossoms into full orchestration and no limitations. So it goes into whether you want to go fully orchestral or other synths or just sort of a wider palette of instrumentation. No limitation on track count or composition style or anything else. Basically, this shows, number one, that how you can take a similar idea and sort of extend it out between these different realms. So if there was very little budget and technology for audio, even thrown back to the original dawn of game audio, you could still make interesting thematic music that also transitions into modern production, and with no restrictions, here's what the theme to your game could sound like. So just other ways of taking the work that you've done and exploring it further to build out your portfolio piece. But a good set of examples overall of the types of tracks that can be created from this type of assignment. Hold on, I've lost my slides here. Well, anyway, I do want to find that. So we are going to wrap it up here for the peer review, and we will turn it over to the slides and the archive for the new assignments for this week. As I mentioned, you will be, if you have any sort of issues with Wise and with the 2D platformer setup or Angry Bots setup, please reach out and let me know. And the rest of the archive will discuss the new assignments, we'll discuss the video capture, and the final project delivery. I'll stick around for a while after we're done here and answer any questions, but other than that, we'll wrap it up here, and I'll see you again on Thursday. If you have any questions, please let me know or message me on FSO. Thank you very much. All right, so we have our submissions there. Like I said, the focus of this week is, your final week is to take the information and the projects that you've worked on and put them in the best light to show them off beyond the class and beyond your time at Full Sail, and be able to show the work off that you've done and completed, hopefully to future employers and future clients and whatnot. So as you have been progressing through all of your classes, you certainly should be gathering together as much of your classwork and materials and projects that you've been working on and put it together into a strong demo reel to show that off. And that includes these game projects. They are well and good as grades and as projects for a class, but their real intention is to give you a vehicle to show off your music and to show off your work and be able to demonstrate that off out there as you get started in the industry. So we are going to talk about the best way of showing off your music that is intended to play back in the game is to actually have somebody play the game. The best way of demonstrating your music for a game is to actually demo that game. So you have the game projects, you have the game applications, and you can distribute those as you wish. They are yours. They are free for you, free for educational purposes, free for demo purposes. The only thing is you just you would indicate that you did all of the music and sound, but you don't claim that you created the game. but they are for you to put on a website, put it in Dropbox, and send it around to future clients or future employers, and to show off your work. However, there are some limitations, mostly like technical limitations, with demonstrating your game. The first one is it's a Mac game, and so whoever wants to play the game needs to have a Mac computer in order to play it. The games can be put in or made as PC games, but that takes a lot of extra understanding and programming to convert the projects. I mean, it is possible, but mostly you have a Mac application. And so somebody has to have a Mac, and maybe whoever you're sending this off to has a computer, and they can check it out. They have to have a computer powerful enough to play the games. That isn't as much of an issue as it used to be, as people's computers have progressively gotten better over the years and have started with better computers. We really don't have much of an issue running these projects. So then you have another issue of very smart people on the internet won't probably just download some random application and run it on their computer. You would be very smart not to just download random zip files and open them up and play them on your computer. Now, of course, that's not the case with these applications, and they aren't. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, but just a random link on a website, you're not going to get tons of people just saying, okay, sure, I'm just going to download this unknown application and run it. So you need to have some way of showing off your work. You need to have some way of people being able to see your music working in a game. You could just take like one of your main loop files and put it up on SoundCloud and say, hey, here's a loop that I wrote for a game. And I promise it works in the game. So the best way of showing off your music working in the game is actually having the game to show off. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a video capture of you playing the game with your music and sound effects working. So by this point in the month, you have composed the music for both of these projects, created all the sound effects. We had an opportunity for peer review, and you also got feedback for your submission. You have the opportunity to do any revisions or changes to that composition or those sound effects. Last week you used Wise and used an audio middleware tool to connect your music and your sound effects working in the game. You got it working in the game, you tested it out, you played the game, and you listened to your sound effects and your music, and more than likely found some issues with it. I mean, I guess you could knock it out of the park first time every single time, but most of the time you get it in the game and there's I don't know, 75, 80% of it's all right, but there's another 20% there that I need to tweak and to change. So you go back to your sounds and you tweak your sounds a little bit. You go back to your music and you mix your files and you bounce everything out again. And you test it, put it back in the game, test it out. And that is a very constant kind of revision or iteration cycle where you compose something, you say, I think this is going to work. You put it in the game, go, man, that kind of works, but I need to do this. Then you go back and you fix it, you put it back in the game, you test it out, and you go around and around. So once you get everything set up in the game, then now you're ready to do this final video capture. It basically proves the process that you have created all the music and sound effects, put it in the game, tested it out, and have something to show for it. So you will be using QuickTime and a program called Loopback in order to capture the video on the screen or the game on the screen. All right, so let me talk about how you will set this up and how this will actually work. So actually I can just do this real quick. When you go on FSO, here's week 4. Here's your final game captures assignment. Notice that it is 0 weighted. That doesn't mean that you don't have to do it. It's just not turned in here. You are going to turn it down here in the final project delivery. So don't just ignore the assignment because it is 0 weighted. But it provides you with all the material. It says you will submit this YouTube link in a separate assignment on FSO. Final game capture. So you'll get a PDF here, and you'll get a PDF here. And the first one just gives you mostly just an overview and delivery instructions. Just kind of a real quick summary of how it all works and how to deliver everything here. But there's a separate PDF that goes slide by slide and goes into a lot more detail. So let me just take a look at this here. You will use QuickTime, which is already installed on your computer, and a program called Loopback in order to capture audio inside of your computer. Loopback is a free application. You can just go to the link here. Well, it's not a free application. It costs $99, but you don't need the $99 version. I don't know, unless you completely love the application and you want to support these people, but really you just need the free download for our purposes. The limitation with the free download is that it lasts for 15 minutes, and you only need to record for a minute or two. So if for some reason the 15 minutes runs out, then you just shut down the program and open it back up, and you got another 15 minutes. But after a while, it starts blasting white noise at you, so make sure if you hear that, that's what's going on there. So you just download the Loopback, and what it is it is a virtual audio cable application for your computer. Meaning, you are going to record the video using QuickTime. You've probably used QuickTime at some point. This is actually QuickTime down here for all my videos. QuickTime is just capture the video from your webcam, or actually in this instance it's going to capture the actual screen, but QuickTime doesn't allow you to do audio from inside of your computer. Actually, here's a better view of it. This is what it looks like when you open up and do the screen recording, and when you hit this down arrow, it doesn't allow you to record from inside of your own computer because of all sorts of nefarious copyright reasons. They don't want you recording everything that's ever been played through your entire computer, but for our purposes, it's your music. You want to record it, so you need to have a way of actually doing that. That's where Loopback comes in. And when you download Loopback and you run it, it looks like this. Here. And it says, hey, click here to create a new virtual device. And when you create a new virtual device, it's actually creating like an audio interface inside of your computer. Just like you take a cable and you go cable out of a guitar into an amp, or just a cable out of one thing into another. This takes a cable, a virtual cable, and goes out of your game into QuickTime. If I look at my audio MIDI setup now, it actually adds an extra interface to run everything through. And when you do that and you go back to QuickTime, oh my goodness. Hello, computer. There it goes. When you come back here and look in here, you should now have a Loopback audio interface. Once you do all of that, the other thing you need to do is come in here and you need to tell it to actually go what application you want to record. And you want it to point to 2D Platformer or Angry Bots, whichever one you're recording. Right here. And when you do that, it shows up here. You will be able to, I don't want to do this right now, but You want to be able to listen through your speakers. You uncheck the mute audio sources so that you can hear everything. And then you go run the game, and you should be able to meter it. Once you play the game, you should see some meters here inside of the screen recording, and you know at that point that it's working. When you get this set up, you might hear it doubled up, like it might monitor back twice. Depends on how you have your audio set up, but it either can be this, it could be could be monitoring through QuickTime, which could be this fader. It could be this setting, monitor through audio through whatever your output is. So double check those just to make sure. The other thing is, if you hear it doubled, it doesn't actually capture doubled. So you can just hit record anyway. You'll monitor it doubled, and then you'll listen. The video will be fine. So just a couple of pointers there. So you'll install Loopback. You'll set up for the screen recording. Like I said, you'll create a new virtual device. You'll select the game application that you want to run. You check the checkboxes. You open up QuickTime. You set up a new screen recording. I showed you this where you click the little arrow and you want to set up to Loopback so that you can record inside of QuickTime. At that point, you should see meters. And you can hit record. Depends on if you have like two screens set up. If you're just recording on your one screen, you can either click and drag just a portion of your screen if it's in a window, or you can just click and it will record the entire screen. Depends on how you have it set up. The only thing to watch out for is most of everybody's computers now have Retina displays, and that's like a really super high resolution. And if you do the entire full screen, it might just slow everything down trying to capture all that stuff. It just might be something to watch out for. I got a couple more slides on that. So the best thing to do is run it in a window and just kind of highlight over the window so that it only captures. You don't capture all of your messy desktop and all this extra stuff. You just capture exactly what you want. So it starts the screen capture. You can run like I said, you can run it in a window. If you click this little checkbox, it says it's in a window. If you unclick this checkbox, it says it's not in a window. More than likely, you've played the game up to this point. You probably know how best it is to run. You've probably already set all this stuff, if you even had to mess with it at all. So more than likely, it's just fine. But if things start acting screwy while trying to do the recording, some of these settings can help. So you hit record when you're ready to go, and you start recording and demonstrating the game. The actual content of the video, I leave that very much up to you. It's your demo video. It's what you want to show off and how you want to show it off. What I'm most concerned with, most focused on, is the process. The fact that you have the game, you have the music and sound effects working in the game. That's a huge portion of the project that you're now demonstrating. And you also have QuickTime, and you've got Loopback or something installed. I guess I should also point out, if you already have and you use something like Soundflower or Audio Hijack, those things are identical to Loopback, or at least in our function, for what we need. And so you can use those pieces of software. As long as it doesn't watermark it or do anything weird with the video or audio. If you already have it set up in a certain way, you can use that. But once you've captured this video, you show that you have all of the sound effects and music working in the game, and you can do a video capture. You have the game playing back. You're using QuickTime and something like Loopback to capture the audio. And so if later on you have a different project or different sounds, you want to redo this one, you can always just create new video captures to show the work that you've done. Demonstrate all the music and sound design. The other thing to point out is I do not count every single sound effect, meaning that I don't like track that you have triggered every single sound effect in every piece of music, because I know that a lot of it or some of it is left up to chance. You can't always trigger every single music file because it's random. So you're going to get like 3 intros, 3 main loops, and only 2 of the endings will play within about 2 minutes long. We suggest that the videos be around 1 minute to 2 minutes long, which is right here. Oops. Right. Oh, there it is. Video capture should be no longer than 2 minutes. So again, the content is up to you. How you demonstrate it is up to you. I would suggest a big one is don't play the game like you're trying to win the game. Don't just do the video capture just to show off how good you are at playing the game. It's about showing off all of the sounds. One common thing that I'll see especially with 2D platformer, is I'll hear the intro and then they'll start playing the game, and for like a minute or two I'll just see them play the game and they'll never die, or they'll just die once at the end and stop the video, and that means I only saw 1 intro and 1 ending. You created 4 other files and never showed anybody. So die a couple of times, jump off the edge, trigger some of those ending cues, try to trigger as many of the sound effects as possible, and just kind of, show it off in its best light overall. Then you stop the screen recording. You save the screen recording, name it your last name, your first name, GCP Week4 2D platformer, whatever or Angry Bots. Do not name it last name, first name. Your name isn't last name, first name. You have a last name. You have a first name. Please, it happens every month. Somebody at some point names something last name, first name. So just watch out for that. And then please, please, please check your screen recording. Watch the video after it's done. This happens. I mean, most people do this, no problem. But for some reason, I will always, every month, I'll get a series of videos that either the audio is just missing, or they used the internal microphone on their computer. It played out of their computer speakers and then back into the internal microphone. And if it didn't feed back, then it sounds horrible. It just sounds really thin, and you hear them in the background, like breathing and clicking on their keyboard, and it's really kind of weird. And you hear their dog barking in the background and their family running around or whatever it is. So just watch out for that. Double check the video. Make sure it has the correct content of it. It has the correct thing that you captured. The other thing is don't hit record and record it for 2 minutes the first time, because there's no telling if you got it right the first time. So just hit record for a few seconds, and then stop it and check the recording and make sure you're actually capturing the thing you think you're recording. So that so you don't have to do it over and over again and waste any time. A couple optional tips. Clear off the desktop. If you are capturing any aspect of the desktop, it's probably best to just make it as clear as possible. I know a lot of folks, we have audio directors and people in different game teams come and talk to our Full Sail student, or come talk to our students, and they'll say often, if we see screenshots or things and it just looks like you have a messy desktop and you posted up a video and it just looks like things are all over the place, it's not probably going to help your cause overall, because a lot of people don't want to work with that. So you can either do a full screen or a high resolution recording. You can do a low resolution recording. If more than likely the video capture is just going to work just fine. Every once in a while, depending on people's computers and whatever they're running or how they have it set up, this might start making your computer chug a little bit, because you got to play the game and do a video capture at the same time. If that is the case, then as long as the audio doesn't stutter or doesn't drop out, if the video kind of gets slow or choppy, that's fine. For the purposes of the video, for the grade and for the assignment, that's fine. Obviously, you want to make as a high quality video as possible. I wouldn't really even consider just focusing on the fact that it's an assignment, create a proper and a demo video that you can use beyond the class. So if need be, try shrinking down the resolution of the game. Maybe even try shrinking down the resolution of your monitor and your screen. That might help create smoother videos overall. Once you have done the video for both Angry Bots and 2D Platformer, you're going to post them up on YouTube. Just put them up there. You can put it just so that I can view it. You don't have to make it completely public, but don't make it private. Make sure that you post it up and you can share the link and have everybody reference it. So the assignment of video capture is really getting everything set up. Once it's working, then it's just playing the game and just showing off how your music and sound effects sound in the game. All right, so that is your final video capture. And to then show it off, or then to kind of deliver the final version of everything back here on FSO. The kind of big assignment for this week is your final project delivery. And this is going to be basically, it's a 10-question test, but it's not like a test that you study for because you have all the answers. It's just really a summary of your composition. So it's broken down into two halves. 5 of the questions are for 2D Platformer, 5 of the questions for Angry Bots. They're very similar to each other. The first one is 2D Platformer video capture. Provide the YouTube link to your 2D Platformer game capture video. So you just did the video capture, you uploaded it to YouTube, now post the YouTube link here. Make sure that it works. You can always go into incognito mode to check links. That's how I do a lot of my stuff with YouTube and Google, since I have like a personal login for YouTube and Google, but whenever I want to do any Full Sail stuff, you just go into incognito mode and it forgets who you are, and then you can log in as whatever you want. So if you just double check all the links that you're going to send me, make sure that they work. You can use incognito mode to do that, or send them to somebody else, and then that's how I will be able to check it also. So give me a YouTube link. This is actually quite important. A missing YouTube link or a missing audio track in a video renders the submission ungradable. If I can't hear it, if I can't hear your music and your sound effects, or the video doesn't work, or the link doesn't work, I can't grade the rest of the assignment. So make sure the video is there and working. Then you'll send me a screenshot of your DAW session. You will, this is the 2D Platformer instrumentation. List the instruments that you used in the intros, main loop, and ending cues. Name any synths or sample library sources for all the tracks. So you will tell me what instruments you used. Tell me in the intros, the main loops, and the endings, which synths, which drums. Don't just tell me I used a piano and I used a banjo and an organ and a synthesizer. Tell me which presets, which sample libraries, which synthesizers you used, which presets you used, so that the idea is if somebody else had to recreate this session, they knew what instruments. They could go load up those, assuming that they had the same instrumentation that you did. Somebody could kind of recreate all of this stuff if necessary. Next, 2D Platformer transitions. You will take screenshots of your intros, your main loops, and your endings, and then line them up in a particular way. You are going to take your intro 1 and connect it to main loop 2, and then connect it to ending 3. And then take intro 2 and connect it to main loop 3, and then go to ending 1. And then take intro 3 and go to main loop 1 and go to ending 2. guess I could just read it up here. Basically, it's taking all of your tracks and rearranging them into different orders, taking a screenshot of it, and then answering a few questions, like describe what you listen to each track. How does the music transition from one cue to the next? Describe what you hear. Does the intensity of the music build with the intro cue? Are the same instruments heard from the intros through the main loops and the endings? Are there any hiccups or pops as the music shifts from one music cue to the next? So these are just basic overview. How well did it work? Did it sound as you expected? Just kind of give me insight into the final product. Then you will create a screenshot of your final mix. Give me a peak level and an RMS level. Use the level meter plugin found in Logic, just so I can get an overview of your levels. AngryBots section is very much very similar. AngryBots video capture. Provide the YouTube link for that. Give me a screenshot of your AngryBots session. And list the instrumentation used in your ambient, buzzer action, mech action, and spider action cues. Then you'll take your 4 files, line them all up together, ambient, buzzer action, mech action, spider action, and then basically comment the same way. How did it work? Listen to your cues playing back together. Describe what you hear. How well did the cues play back? Are there any noticeable issues? Do the cues start and end at the same time? Are there any rhythms that clash? Do the melodies or harmonies clash? Just to get an overview of how well the main portion of the composition worked. Give me a summary with a screenshot of your AngryBots mix. So really, it's just kind of like a post-mortem overview, summary, summation of how well everything worked in the final projects. So that is the direction we are headed in this last week. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to stick around here for a few minutes if you have any questions. But again, this is the last week. Let me know if you are having any challenges or anything that you need to discuss in the final part of the week. But we have one more class on Thursday. We can listen to or discuss any or anything that you need, or take a look at your final video. But other than that, let's end it there. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again on Thursday.